Imagine sitting in a cockpit at 40,000 feet, pitch black outside. Your radar screen is the only thing lighting up the darkness. And somewhere out there, closing in fast, is a Soviet nuclear bomber. You have one job. Stop it before it reaches British soil. Now imagine doing that in an aircraft that almost nobody remembers today. That aircraft was the Gloster Javelin. And this is its story. Welcome to Aviation History Hub. If you are new here, we cover the aircraft that changed, history, the celebrated ones, the forgotten ones, and everything in between. Hit that subscribe button right now and tap the bell so you never miss an episode. Because trust me, the stories we cover here are ones you are not going to hear anywhere else. Now, before we talk about the Javelin itself, we need to go back and understand why it existed in the first place. Because no aircraft is born in a vacuum. Every great machine comes from a very specific fear. And in the late 1940s, Britain had a very specific and very real fear sitting on its doorstep. World War II had just ended, but the peace that followed was anything but peaceful. The Soviet Union had emerged from the war as the dominant land power in Europe. France and Britain were economically and militarily exhausted. The United States, through its Strategic Air Command, he had established a kind of nuclear deterrence over Western Europe, but that deterrence was fragile, and everyone knew it. By 1946, Moscow's nuclear laboratory had reached a critical milestone, and intelligence analysts in the West were warning that it was only a matter of time before the Soviets had nuclear weapons of their own. They were right. And when that day came, the threat was no longer just a conventional army marching westward. The threat was a bomber, flying high and fast, carrying something that could erase a city in an instant. Britain's Air Ministry understood this all too well. What they needed was not just a fast plane, they needed something that could get off the ground quickly, climb to extreme altitude, find a target in total darkness or bad weather, and destroy it before it reached British airspace. They called it an all-weather night fighter, and in January of 1947, they issued a formal specification laying out exactly what they wanted. The aircraft had 2 intercept targets at up to 40,000 feet. It had to reach speeds approaching 600 miles per hour. It needed to climb 45,000 feet in just 10 minutes. And on top of all that, it needed a flight endurance of 2 hours, the ability to handle high-speed maneuvers, and a short takeoff distance, all on a tight budget. Easy, right? 2 companies stepped up to the challenge. De Havilland proposed a twin-boom interceptor, drawing on their experience with the Vampire and Venom. Gloster, fresh off the success of the Meteor, which had been Britain's first jet fighter, proposed something far more ambitious, something nobody at Gloster had ever built before, and something that, frankly, looked like nothing anyone had ever seen. Gloster's initial proposal was a modified Meteor, but by late 1947, their engineers had completely rethought the design. What emerged was a delta wing layout, a sweeping triangular wing shape that was radical for British aviation at the time. Over the next 2 years, as the Air Ministry kept changing its requirements and demanding more prototypes before committing to anything, Gloster kept refining their design. It went through multiple evolutions, multiple names, and multiple headaches. But by 1950, they had built a full-scale wooden mock-up of what they were calling the GA-5. The aircraft was enormous. It was unusual looking. It had a presence that stopped people in their tracks. A group of Empire test pilots, school students, who has shown the mock-up sitting in its hangar. And one of them reportedly looked up at it and said, and I love this quote, "My lord, what a great beast." That reaction tells you everything you need to know about the Javelin's character. It was not a sleek, elegant thoroughbred. It was a heavy, powerful, purpose-built machine. And some people loved it for exactly that reason. By November 1951, the first working prototype was ready to fly. The man behind the controls was test pilot Bill Waterton. And from the very first flight, the aircraft made its personality known. Waterton experienced severe vibrations in the air, caused by engine exhaust interference with the rudder. Oil from 2 exhaust vents literally painted a visible trail down the side of the plane, which, if nothing else, made the problem very easy to diagnose. When Waterton landed and the crew eagerly asked how the flight went, he reportedly paused and said simply, "She goes up, she goes down." Not exactly the glowing endorsement the Gloster team was hoping for, but also not a disaster. The aircraft had flown, it had flown predictably, which in the world of experimental aircraft counts for a great deal. Dozens more test flights followed. Most were uneventful. Then came flight number 99. In one of those moments that test pilots tend to describe with a kind of studied calm that makes everyone else's hair stand on end. The elevators, the control surfaces that allow the pilot to pitch the aircraft up and down, simply fell off. Waterton somehow managed to bring the aircraft home, landing with the undercarriage collapsed, walking away completely unharmed. Now you might think an incident like that would have killed the program. Instead, and this is the part that tells you how desperate the Air Ministry was for a good interceptor, the Ministry of Supply became more interested in the Javelin, not less. They believed Gloster's design had more room for growth and future upgrades than the competing de Havilland proposal. Sometimes, it really is all about potential. By August 1952, a second prototype was ready for public display at the Farnborough Air Show, one of the most prestigious aviation events in the world. To qualify, the aircraft needed 10 hours of flight time, and the team pushed hard to get there. At Farnborough, the Javelin did not disappoint. During one of the display passes, Waterton rolled the aircraft in a sweeping maneuver that drew gasps from the crowd. Air Vice Marshal Richard Akerley, watching from the ground, was reportedly so stunned by the sight of this enormous delta-wing machine rolling through the sky that he exclaimed, "My God, it's like watching the bloody Albert Memorial roll over." High praise, in the most British way possible. But while the crowds were impressed, the media was not so kind. Throughout the Javelin's entire development period, journalists hammered the design relentlessly. The biggest criticism was speed. The Javelin was subsonic, and in the era of the sound barrier, that felt like a failure. Critics in print argued that Britain's new interceptor couldn't even break the speed of sound. Then one day, a sonic boom was heard over London. The official story from the test team was that the pilot had been having trouble with his oxygen mask, leaned forward to adjust some instruments, and accidentally entered a shallow dive that inadvertently exceeded the speed of sound. The criticism about subsonic performance went noticeably quiet after that. Development pressed forward. And on the 22nd of July, 1954, the first production, Javelin, took its maiden flight. A total of 427 Javelins would eventually be built across all variants. The initial production model was powered by two Armstrong Siddeley Sapphire engines, each producing 8,000 pounds of thrust. Its radar system could theoretically detect a target at up to 20 nautical miles, theoretically. In practice, the system had significant reliability problems, and it was quickly replaced in the next variant with an American radar that worked considerably better. What followed was a rapid sequence of improvements that pushed the Javelin further and further toward the original vision. Better stall control, and an all-moving tailplane came next. Then missile hardpoints, allowing the aircraft to carry air-to-air weapons for the first time. But it was the FAW-7 variant that most closely fulfilled what the Air Ministry had originally asked for. Back in 1947, the engines were upgraded, now producing 11,000 pounds of thrust each. For de Havilland Firestrike missiles could be carried in Fred-guided weapons that gave the aircraft genuine standoff killing capability in the dark. Later versions added afterburners, a refueling probe, and extended-range fuel tanks. In its final configuration, the Javelin had a top speed of Mach 0.93, a service ceiling of over 52,000 feet, and a combat range of around 830 nautical miles. It was, for its time, and within its intended role, a formidable machine. The Rave's first, truly, their interceptor. The Javelin entered service with genuine enthusiasm from the pilots who flew it, even if the press continued to be skeptical. Most of its operational life was spent exactly where it was designed to be, on quick reaction alert, guarding British airspace, but it also deployed overseas. Squadrons operated from Hong Kong, Germany, Cyprus, and the Far East. In one unusual deployment, Javelins were sent to Zambia in 1966 as part of a political and military pressure campaign, tasked with preventing aircraft from crossing the border, exactly the kind of presence and deterrence mission the aircraft had been built for. And that, interestingly, is where the Javelin's legacy gets complicated. The aircraft's critics always focused on what it couldn't do. It wasn't supersonic, it drank fuel aggressively, and it wasn't as flashy as American jets of the same era. But the pilots who flew it often tell a different story. One veteran who served in Cyprus noted that the Javelin could carry 4 missiles and 2 cannons simultaneously, and could dramatically outperform the Hawker Hunters. It was deployed alongside performed a NATO ally operating in the early 1960s. That kind of firepower was genuinely rare. The combination of search, radar, and 4 air-to-air missiles in a single airframe, capable of operating at night and in poor weather, made the Javelin arguably more dangerous than history has ever given. A credit for there is also a fascinating and very human footnote to the Javelin story. Throughout the 1950s, Gloster's employees remember receiving a steady stream of letters from young boys across Britain, asking for photographs of the Javelin. Company made a point of writing back to as many as they could. It is a small detail, but it speaks to the aircraft's hold on the public imagination, especially among the generation that grew up dreaming of becoming jet pilots. But the writing was on the wall by the late 1950s. In 1957, the British government published what became known as the Defence White Paper. It was, to put it plainly, a catastrophe for the British aviation industry. Military spending was cut sharply. Fighters and bombers were declared largely obsolete, a position that neither the United States nor the Soviet Union shared. Ambitious upgrade programs for the Javelin, including a thinner wing for supersonic flight, were quietly shelved. And when the English Electric Lightning arrived, with its blistering speed and extraordinary climb rate, the Javelin's days were numbered. The last Javelin returned from overseas service in Singapore in 1968. Its only confirmed combat result was a maneuvering killed against an Indonesian transport aircraft, forcing it out of restricted airspace through the sheer presence of an interceptor, closing in fast. The very final flight of any Javelin took place on January 24, 1975, when the last surviving airframe landed at RAF Duxford to take its place in the Imperial War Museum. The aircraft had gone from terrifying prototype to museum piece in less than 25 years. And with it, in a very real sense, went an era. Gloster Aircraft Company, following a merger in 1963, effectively ceased to exist. The Javelin was their last aircraft. The company that had given Britain its first jet fighter went out quietly and largely unnoticed. About 10 Javelins survive today, preserved in museums around the United Kingdom. If you ever get the chance to stand next to one, do it. Because when you look up at that enormous delta wing and that blunt, purposeful nose, you are looking at the machine that Britain trusted to stand between its cities and the nuclear bombers. Of the Cold War, it was far from perfect. But it was ready. And sometimes, being ready is the whole point. If you enjoyed this video, drop a comment below and tell us what forgotten Cold War aircraft you want us to cover next. We read every single one. Share this with a fellow aviation fan, because these stories deserve to be heard. And if you have not subscribed to Aviation History Hub yet, now is the time. We have a lot more history coming your way, and you do not want to miss it. This video was produced for historical and educational purposes only. All information is sourced from publicly available historical records and aviation archives. We do not glorify or promote military conflict of any kind. Thank you for watching.